I will be presenting what's a collaboration that is, in a way, a continuation of what has just been presented by Henrik in deliverable 2.1. This is deliverable 3.1, which is a report on the specific association between political trust and political behavior. This is a deliverable that mostly deals with only deals with electoral participation. We, of course, have another one going on non-electoral participation. And the whole idea of this deliverable was to take a look at this association and to try to problematize it a little bit. Of course, we know that electoral participation and participation in general is actually at the heart of many of the definitions of liberal democracies. We've also been witnessing declining levels of participation in some countries and in some years, and this can also be understood as a reflection of this content and also of declining trust for some citizens. And we know from the literature, some of the findings suggest that lower levels of trust are associated with lower levels of participation, but we do not necessarily. We wanted to give a more nuanced picture on what is this association in terms also of the multi-level polities and also the potential differences in terms of regional variation and over time variation as well. So we actually start this report by taking a look at what's in the literature in terms of theoretical state-of-the-art review of the theoretical and empirical arguments that connect political trust with electoral participation. And we see how it's actually really relevant to take a look at this association, of course, in the context of electoral behavior in a more general sense in Europe. How this relates to extreme and protest votings, and how this is connected with cleavage emergence, polarization, and also patterns of and de-alignment of the party systems in Europe. In terms of empirical findings, as I was already mentioning, the literature has already pointed out at this association between political trust and electoral behavior, and how higher levels of political trust are connected with higher turnout and also with lower levels of protest voting for certain parties. What we do in the second part of the report is taking a look using at this empirical study, taking a look at the different patterns in this association using existing but also original data as a spin-off of this project, as part of what Henrik has just said about the limitations of data as well. We take a look at two different layers. We take a look at turnout and at party choice, and we do so turnout. We analyze these associations at the EU and at the national level. We're also showing some very preliminary findings on the local level, but again, data limitations are a problem here, and will be part of our recommendations as well. In terms of party choice, we take a look at the national level dynamics, and we do all of these things by using, as I was saying, existing data. For the EU level, we are mobilizing the European election studies. We're mostly taking a look at the past 2 decades, between 2004 and 2019, 15 years rather. For the national level, we use the European Social Survey from 2002, the first wave, until almost the last one, wave 10 in 2022 to 2020 to 2022. And at the local level, the single cross sectional study of the European Value Survey, which I will not be presenting here, but for you to get a reference. And regarding party choice, we were also, as I was already advancing, using our own classification based on existing data sets for party families, so that we could match the individual level data of the EES with the classifications for party families in the European Social Survey. Moving to some of the results, starting with the relationship between turnout and trust at the EU level, what we see is actually what we already found in the literature in terms of the generally positive association between trust and turnout. And so it's positively associated in the sense that more trust tends to be connected with more turnout. Even if we find some small regional patterns, there are also, no clear patterns in a way. If you take a look at quadrant A, which would be countries in which there's high levels of political trust and high levels of turnout, we mostly see um, uh, Western, Central, and Nordic countries, but we also find other exceptions to this. So we find Malta and we find Spain also. The same happens with the opposite side of this graph, in which we mostly see Eastern European countries, but we also find the UK down below, so no clear pattern. There are some differences over time, as you can see in the second subgraph. There's a weaker association between turnout and trust at the EU level in 2009, and there's different levels of dispersion earlier or later in the period. At the national level, we see a slightly more positive association, even if it's also weak in a way. What we find here also is that these other sides of the graph, so those countries in which there is low levels of trust and high levels of turnout, and the other way around, are quite the exception, and these are residual categories. But overall, the direction of the association is the same, but slightly more positive. If we break down by years, or rather waves of the European Social Survey, we find this consistent association over time with similar slopes. But of course, as you can see here, right in the first wave of the European election studies, European Social Survey, of 2002, and the last one, the association is a little bit weaker, and actually the association is a little bit stronger between 2008 and 2014. If we take a look at the second layer that I was mentioning, the connection between party choice and trust, we are looking only here at the national level. And as I was saying, we are as a spin-off again of this project and related to data availability, we were working in a way to make sure that we could include party choice with the individual level data of the European Social Survey. What we see, starting not just or not with the association, but rather with the general trends of electoral behavior, what we see is that using only here, or we are only showing two regional clusters: West in Central European countries and Eastern European countries, and we actually see patterns of volatility of the alignment, and also regional differences also for the other two clusters. If we take a look at the association, what we see is that the strongest associations in terms of party families relate to the support for radical right-wing parties and trust, and also for the vote to Christian democratic parties. But the association is the opposite. So voting for radical right-wing parties is negatively associated with trust, and positively associated for Christian Democrats. By party families, we tend to see that the vote for challenger parties is associated with has a negative association with trust, or sometimes also no association, and the opposite tends to happen at the aggregate level, pulling all the countries together. For mainstream parties, and vote for mainstream parties tends to be associated positively with political trust. Green parties are a tricky case in the sense that in some countries these parties are challenger, whereas in other countries these are mainstream. But what we found is that vote for green parties is positively associated with political trust. And we also find regional differences in this association. I'm showing now Nordic countries compared to South European countries, and find regional differences, as you can see here. Over time, we also see that for the vote for some of these party families evolves in a different way, and it goes up for eco and green parties, social democratic parties, conservatives, liberals, and the opposite happens with Christian democratic parties, radical right-wing parties, and other parties, although we also see some cases in which there are trendless evolution. So some of the conclusions, again, we tend to know more about the empirical patterns of participation than about the consequences of participation. We were also engaging in how this association is relevant to understand the effects or the changes in political trust, taking, of course, into account the specific context in Europe and how this relates to protest voting and the vote or party preferences for radical parties. Empirical findings tend to support the regional differences in the association between political trust and participation, not so much in terms of the differences across polity levels, taking into account that we actually, as part of the recommendation, have a hard time trying to make use of local level data precisely because of issues relating with data availability, but not only. In terms of data matching, what I was just mentioning about the interoperability between different data sets. And of course, as part of the recommendations, we can only suggest that further improvement in existing data is important, not just in the type of questions that are being included in the surveys, the existing surveys, but also the necessity to post-harmonize some of these data sets to make the most out of it.